It's my nerd world. Welcome to it, a Star Wars podcast, and we have a lot of news this week. I have a new theory about when the next feature-length film, Rogue Squadron, is going to be set. We have a new Mandalorian Gallery episode to discuss that covers the season finale of Season 2 of The Mandalorian. We have more new with details about the Obi Wan Kenobi show, and more specifically, Vader's involvement in it. It looks like a theory that I had about the Obi Wan Kenobi show might actually be correct. Plus, an interesting article, Star Wars Intel from StarWars.com about the Death Star. We'll talk a bit about that as well. So, let's not waste any more time and get right to this week's show. I am so glad you decided to join me.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My nerd world.
Just let it in.
I heard another podcast make the comment that they wondered what the sequel trilogy would have been like if Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni were in charge of it. Boy, you want to talk about a what if? I don't even know where to start on what a sequel trilogy would have looked like if Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, like I said, would have been in charge of it. Like, it's tough to even speculate on without having a point of reference. I love the sequel trilogy. Welcome to the show, by the way. I am your host, Jon Justice, here on My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast. So it's tough because, like, you can't necessarily go with anything that we got in the sequel trilogy. Like, the idea would be that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni would create a story from scratch in the way that J.J. Abrams created a story from scratch, right? Along with the other individuals involved in the creative process and the story group, right? I'll never forget going to the 2015 Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim with my oldest son, Logan, and how excited I was waiting in line to get into the Force Awakens gallery, right? And this was the same day that the main trailer was released, and this was a room that was filled with glass cases that had props from the movie, which was just so cool. Like, I want to go back and look at those pictures now, right? Just so cool. And I remember seeing for the first time on the placards in front of the various costumes, showing, First Order Trooper. And that's when most people first found out about the First Order. So, it's tough without knowing, like, what the foundation of the story would be, what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni could have done. The only thing I'll say is I wonder if a sequel trilogy done by those two individuals who have been, in charge for the most part of the recent Disney Plus content that we've been receiving, right? Whether it's Mandalorian or the Bad Batch, Clone Wars. You could probably safely speculate that it would have more returning familiar characters than perhaps what we got in the sequel trilogy beyond the main four, of Luke, Han, Leia, and Chewie. You wouldn't have a Rey or a Finn at all. So I just, just an interesting thought process. We'll never know what that would have, been like. And again, I love the sequel trilogy, so I'm fine with it. But it does also raises the question of, well, wow, if they took over, say, like a 10, 11, 12 of continuing the saga, what would they do? And would any, what kind of impact would the sequel trilogy have on that? Just a little thought experiment as we open the show this week. So I'm going to steer away. I'm going to steer away a bit from the timeline commentary that I've been providing on the show the past few weeks. This woulda, coulda, shoulda's of the material that is being released by Disney and Lucasfilm. I will say this, just because I feel like I don't know. I feel like the shows have been stifled a bit the past couple weeks, just because of my own my own thoughts and opinions around the content that they're releasing and the timelines they're placing them in. I was talking to Melinda yesterday, and we were discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We watched it was a one-off of that recently got posted on Disney Plus, and it was about the fake Mandalorian character played by Ben Kingsley, and it's that character that he played, the fake Mandalorian. I'm sorry, not Mandalorian. The Mandarin, the fake Mandarin, right, from Iron Man 3. And I just then realized the 10 rings that we're going to see in Shang-Chi are actually from that organization that was in Iron Man 3. But I told Melinda, that Marvel did such a great job in dealing with their timeline of shifting it back and forth. Like in a movie like Black Widow, it takes place earlier in the timeline than where we ended up in Endgame, or the last Spider-Man movie. But the post-credits scene shifts it back to modern time, right? So it's like a slider. Like it slides over here, and then they slide back in the final scene back to modern time. And that's something that Star Wars hasn't been doing, and I kind of wished that they would do. But now I'm doing exactly the thing that I said I wasn't going to do on the show. So let's move on to some news items this week, because there is a lot to talk about.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
There's a YouTube channel that I enjoy quite a bit called Eckhart's Ladder, and he covers a lot of Star Wars stuff, a lot of gaming. Just a really, really good channel. He recently did a couple of videos actually, talking about Thrawn and Thrawn's inclusion in the storyline post Return of the Jedi, around the Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett coming out. We have some Book of Boba Fett news that we'll share with you here in just a moment. But he's been talking about what he believes is a quasi remake of the Thrawn trilogy, taking place between episodes 6 and 7, Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, and how we are assuming, and we've got some casting details that we've talked about as of late, when it comes to casting not only Thrawn, as we talked about in a previous episode, but also Ezra from Rebels. We know that Ahsoka was looking for Thrawn in that one episode of The Mandalorian season 2. So he laid out in really good with a lot of detail why he believes that Disney and Lucasfilm are potentially remaking the Thrawn trilogy in between the two films, swirling around the Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, and how that could play into some of the live-action streaming series shows that we're going to be getting set within that same time period. Well, that got me thinking, well, that's interesting if that takes place, based on the fact that we're going to be getting the Ahsoka show before Rogue Squadron. And that made me wonder if maybe Rogue Squadron is set also between episodes 6 and 7. Now, that wouldn't necessarily explain Kathleen Kennedy's comment about a new generation of fighter pilots, but it would if you were talking about that particular timeline. And if we got sort of a remake of the Thrawn trilogy, that would potentially mean, as Eckhart's Ladder laid out, that Thrawn could have an armada that the New Republic would have to contend with. So you could actually have a series of stories on an almost epic saga level placed between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, and you could wedge Rogue Squadron in between those two films in that timeline and have it not disrupt what happened in the sequel trilogy, right? So the Rogue Squadron and the fighter pilot story would basically take place in the time period and revolve around a Thrawn-led armada, which could lead to a big climactic battle, ending Thrawn for good, with enough gap in time and links to the First Order as we head into the sequel trilogy. So just a thought that I had watching that video, since we still don't know why or where Rogue Squadron is going to be set, and given the fact that Disney has been so quiet about that. Maybe it's because there's a broader story being told with all these live action shows, and Rogue Squadron is going to fit right into it. As always, throughout the show, if you have any thoughts about what I'm discussing, drop me an email, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. And also you can leave a comment up on YouTube if you're watching or listening to it there. And as I've mentioned before, if you are listening or watching on YouTube and you're getting annoyed by all the ads, go find the podcast on any one of your podcasting platforms. It's on it's on all of them. All right, moving on. We did get a brand new Star Wars gallery this past week. We knew we would be getting one, and it is basically a 45-minute episode of making of episode of The Mandalorian Season 2. But this one featuring Mark Hamill and that season finale episode. It is really a fantastic watch. I don't really have much to say beyond that, as we have other leaks and details and news to share with you. But if you haven't checked it out yet, definitely go and check it out. I love seeing the creative process behind Star Wars and how excited these content creators get, how much they love Star Wars. And that's what initially got me thinking down that line of, wow, what would it have been like if Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau had been in charge of a sequel trilogy, was watching that latest episode of Star Wars Gallery on the Mandalorian Season 2 finale. So definitely go and check that out on Disney Plus if you haven't watched it yet.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
That's right, and we have some leaks for you this week. Star Wars Newsnet put out a pretty big one, and it potentially confirms a theory that I had, although, listen, I'm not going to pat myself on the back too hard. It was an easy theory to make, but they write this in an exclusive this week at StarWarsNewsNet.com. Last December, Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy went a bit off-brand by divulging brief story details about the upcoming Obi Wan Kenobi series, including Hayden Christensen returning to play Darth Vader. Not Anakin Skywalker, but Darth Vader. For the, as Kathleen Kennedy said, and I do that thing with my fingers, rematch of the century. The series has been filming in Los Angeles since April, and we have some exclusive images and details regarding the return of Darth Vader, which provide at least some explanation as to why they brought Hayden Christensen back to play him. So there are going to be some spoilers here. So if you don't want to be spoiled for the Obi Wan Kenobi series, I suggest you check out for a little bit, and then pop back on to see if I'm done talking about him. So that's your warning, and now we're going to talk about some leaking.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
So, in last December's Lucasfilm Showcase, Kathleen Kennedy made a point of saying Hayden Christensen would be returning to the role of Darth Vader, not Anakin. So the question was, why is Lucasfilm bringing back Hayden Christensen to play Darth Vader? Now, I had made, I had come up with a theory that the reason being was, after seeing Darth Vader in Rogue One, one of my favorite moments from that film, and I hope that he's going to be at Vader's castle. That would just be so awesome for the Obi Wan Kenobi series. But we did have a replica made, right? A dummy of Hayden Christensen made that they could put into the Bacta tank, where we got that smoky shot of Vader rising out of the Bacta tank before we see him in the suit when Director Krennic shows up on Mustafar in Vader's castle. And when they made the announcement that Hayden Christensen was returning, my theory had been all along that, well, it is canon that Vader can live without his helmet. Vader, Anakin Skywalker, was taken all the way from Mustafar back to Coruscant without a helmet on. There was never any discussion within the films, maybe in the books, but not in the films, of how long he would have survived. But he didn't have his helmet on for that journey until they put it on in the the medical bay, right, on Coruscant. We also know that he took his helmet off in The Empire Strikes Back, and he's in his antechamber with the helmet off in that famous shot from The Empire Strikes Back. So we know that he can stay alive without the helmet. So what Star Wars Newsnet has found and will reveal adds to that theory. They go on to say, the reason is because we will be seeing Darth Vader without his mask in the series. Dun, 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 dun. Hey, I was right. They have exclusive photos from the set of Obi Wan Kenobi, and also never-before-seen concept art of Vader made for the series. The connective theme between all of this is understanding why Christensen is back as Darth Vader specifically. So, one of the main photos, there's one of a mask, of a breathing apparatus mask. There's another of a back-to-tank. They're pretty nondescript. I mean, it just looks like a black mask that you would see on Vader, very reminiscent of the helmet that he wears. The concept art, though, that they have shows clearly a burned up, Hayden Christensen, much in the same way that we saw him for that quick, brief shot in Rogue One when he's being pulled out of the back to tank around all the smoke. This particular photo shows him basically hanging by some straps, shows a lot of different mechanical pieces attached to his torso. There's circular components attached to his abs. He's not wearing a shirt, and of course his arms are cut off. There's a large component up by where his heart would be on his left chest. And then he's got a mask over his face to breathe. It looks like a black fighter pilot's mask, if you can imagine that. And of course he's bald. He looks like he did in the film. I mean, it looks rad, and this makes a lot of sense as to why you would bring Hayden Christensen back. And also, if they are going to fight, I'd be very interested to know whether or not he'd fight without the helmet on, to provide basically a different point of view from what we've seen before of Vader fighting, to see him actually to see Hayden Christensen's eyes, right? To actually see Hayden Christensen, even if he's in a mask fighting, would be pretty epic. I mean, talk about a visual that we've never seen of Vader before, of perhaps a fully suited Vader without the mask on, but a breathing apparatus, or maybe a different outfit battling Obi Wan Kenobi. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting visual potential in what they could be doing here. They go on to say this is new and never before seen concept art Darth Vader specifically made for the upcoming Disney Plus series, Obi Wan Kenobi. Another image is an artist rendering of a back-to-tank that was on the Obi Wan Kenobi set. They have actual photos of it. They said, we're not sure if the series will use a mannequin, as they did in Rogue One. That's the word I was looking for, mannequin. Or if we'll actually see Hayden in the tank. It could be pretty cool and impactful to see Hayden himself as Vader in the tank in a more animated sense than that steamed-out mannequin from Rogue One. That really boils down to how deep Deborah Chow wants to develop Vader in the series. Could we see a tormented, pained Vader really seeing what he has to go through and survive in his current state that Obi-Wan Kenobi left him in? That would definitely add some layers to the tragedy of the character that we've only seen from the pages of the comic books to this point. And I really like that idea, because I've often wondered, when it comes to bad guys, what are they doing in their off time, right? Are they happy? Are they ever happy? And obviously Vader's a different kind of character, a tormented individual, seeing how he fell to the dark side. So it would be fascinating just to see how he deals with things on a day-to-day basis. There was also an artist rendering of photos of the breathing apparatus itself, which was also featured in the concept art. It adds merit to the idea that Hayden Christensen will be wearing it as opposed to the mannequin from Rogue One. The biggest question is, will he wear it beyond the back-to-tank? Will we see Vader maskless at some point in Obi-Wan Kenobi to give the audience more live-action Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader, as I mentioned before? I think that's very likely. So now that we've given you the facts, we'll do a little speculating, and this is what Star Wars Newsnet goes on to say. I believe we will see a maskless Vader well beyond the limitations of the back-to-tank or the meditation chamber in Obi-Wan Kenobi. Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy understand setting and meeting expectations, and you don't bill Hayden Christensen returning for the rematch of the century as Darth Vader if we only show his face in a brief cameo. There's also the possibility of some flashbacks of Obi-Wan and Anakin, where they could de-age the actors, which would further justify the return of Christensen. But as far as Christensen as Vader goes, I think it's possible we'll see him fighting Kenobi either unmasked or with a damaged mask revealing his face. Think about the duel with Ahsoka from Rebels to make it a more personal fight. Hey, that's just what I said. By the way, I didn't pre-read this, so it just seems like we're all on the same sort of on the same speculation train forcing Obi-Wan to come face to face with Anakin for the first time, not hidden behind Vader's mask. Will add emotional weight to the series that they could never reach if they leave Vader in the mask. And, that could lend, you do it right and you write it and you direct it correctly. And that comment from Obi-Wan Kenobi of he's more machine now than man, twisted and evil, could be further expanded upon. You could have further context to that if they do come face to face and fight each other again. The article goes on to say, I also go back to the reasoning to bring in Christensen to play Vader at all is something that they chose not to do for Rogue One. In order to justify Christensen being Vader, they need to give us a substantial amount of him unmasked. And I think that's exactly what we're going to see. How much and how will they execute it will be determined. But at least with this information we have now, we know we'll be seeing Vader in a different breathing device and using the back-to-tank once again in the Obi Wan Kenobi series, and it will be done by Hayden Christensen. So this brings me down another thought path, right? And apparently Star Wars Newsnet has another exclusive report coming next week that also ties to Vader's role, so we'll certainly have that on next week's show. This brings me to another point. And I wonder how much the Obi Wan Kenobi series is going to re-establish the original trilogy world that started the Star Wars phenomenon, and set and put forward a new set of standards and expectations for the fans. Right? I don't think we're ever going to see a change to the A New Hope Vader Obi-Wan fight moving forward. Okay, that's probably the one thing that I wish that they would do to A New Hope. I think that would be cool. If you haven't seen it on YouTube, there's a fan that put together an updated version of that of the Obi Wan Kenobi Vader fight from A New Hope with the appropriate characters, and it's awesome. And I think it would be really cool to see that fight updated, because that fight on the Death Star in A New Hope is like the most, in my opinion, dated thing in that film based off the context of everything that we have around it as it relates to lightsaber battles, okay? But I don't think that Disney will ever go and do that. I think one day we'll get a remake of A New Hope in the original trilogy. I don't know how far down the line that'll be, but I do believe that one day we will get one. I think part of the reason why is they don't want, they wouldn't want to touch A New Hope to that extent. But also, I think I think Disney and Lucasfilm knows something. And this is just an assumption. I have nothing to base this off of. This is just my opinion. I think A New Hope is probably one of the least watched pieces of Star Wars content by new Star Wars fans. Right? You need to watch it, okay, in order to understand the totality of the universe, right? If you're going to start somebody off on a path of Star Wars, I think most people start with A New Hope. You could start with The Phantom Menace, but A New Hope really establishes things, and the way that the story plays out, it just seems more linear, even though it's not linear. If you start with A New Hope, go to the prequels and then the sequels, right? But it's kind of a nostalgia piece. I can't imagine a lot of new Star Wars fans, not all of them, but most of them. I can't imagine most new Star Wars fans going back and rewatching A New Hope over and over again. I think it's something that you need to watch at least once, especially just as a piece of nostalgia. But after that, because of how old it is, the pacing compared to modern cinema, I imagine new generations will become more familiar with the original trilogy characters through new storytelling. And that's really the point that I wanted to land on. I wonder how much of the storytelling around the around the original trilogy, post and pre, is a reestablishing of a new set of standards for fans who can become familiar with the Star Wars saga beyond the original trilogy, right? I imagine new generations will be more familiar with original trilogy characters through new storytelling. And the Obi Wan Kenobi show could go a long way to establishing that. which again raises another interesting angle of how much storytelling will there be surrounding the original trilogy, to help fans understand the story of Star Wars without the original trilogy. And I really do think that's a part of this process. Not a major focus, but I think that Disney and Lucasfilm look at the stories being told. Andor has wrapped filming. I think there's still some additional filming going on with Obi Wan Kenobi. But those two series could really go a long way, along with Rogue One already existing, to providing the necessary background for new Star Wars fans without ever having to spend a lot of time with the original trilogy. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment up on YouTube. I would like to know your thoughts. All right, let's move on. From Night Edge Media, for what it's worth. Earlier this month, several names were revealed to be on the short list for the Mandalorian fan favorite role of Sabine Wren in the upcoming Ahsoka Disney Plus series. One actress has come up as potentially a front runner, and that is Tati Gabriel. Tati Gabriel is an actress on The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix. And Night Edge Media has heard that Tati Gabriel is apparently the front runner for the role out of Lana Kandor and Havana Rose Liu. Lana Kandor was in X-Men Apocalypse, who would also do a good job. And Havana Rose Liu, I'm not as familiar with. Lana Kandor apparently just signed to star in another production, so she may be unavailable for Ahsoka. They go on to say that Gabrielle still remains the favorite for the role by Lucasfilm. It's unknown at this time if she's been offered the role. Rosario Dawson obviously will return for The Mandalorian Season 2 as the title hero in search of Jedi Ezra Bridger, right? The series is being developed by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. So, look, I was unfamiliar with Tati Gabriel before this story came out. I have no idea how credible this particular outlet happens to be. However, just based off of what I've seen of her, looking her up on the internet before starting the show this week, she looks like she would make a fantastic Sabine Wren. She also looks like she'd make a great Asajj Ventress, to be honest with you. She already has really short hair, cropped, almost to her scalp. So she already kind of looks like Asajj Ventress. But if you put on Sabine Wren's signature a colorful hairstyle from Rebels, then yeah, she definitely could fit that role. As could Lana Kandor. I'm kind of a little bit bummed about that. That's the first I've heard that name of the actress that played Storm from X-Men Apocalypse, and she would be great as well. She would also make a great Asajj Ventress too. So, man, next year is going to be just fantastic when it comes to Star Wars. I really, really am excited, and we're beginning to get more details about the Book of Boba Fett as well. One more last item in terms of leaking and news was Latino Review Online, LRM Online. They've got a YouTube channel and also a website as well. They put out an episode this week, and they had their own leak that Cad Bane would be returning in the Book of Boba Fett series, which doesn't come as a huge surprise, especially seeing his inclusion in the Bad Batch, and bringing him back for such a short stint in the Bad Batch. Seems like, oh wow, Cad Bane popped back up. But he is a fan favorite, and there's a lot of talk that the Book of Boba Fett could be incorporating ideas from what would have been the Boba Fett film, not to mention the Bounty Hunter series that was talked about quite a bit. So, seeing that he's a bounty hunter and how big of a fan Dave Filoni is of Cad Bane, not a huge surprise that we're going to see a live-action version of that character coming up in the Book of Boba Fett. And the way that this year is flying by, man, it's going to be here before we know it. That is the Book of Boba Fett, which includes trailers hopefully soon, right? We're already getting trailers for a lot of movies coming out in December, so I imagine that we are, only a handful of weeks away from Disney and Lucasfilm dropping a trailer for the Book of Boba Fett. Since we really don't know a ton about this show beyond some of the rumors that we've heard about how this is kind of the Mandalorian season 2.1, that it will focus on bounty hunters, and that potentially we could see Luke and Grogu back in it, which could be very interesting, given especially some of the details we found out about the creative process in that season finale of season 2 of The Mandalorian, and how they made Luke, and they hired the guy who's great at deep fakes to come into Lucasfilm. So I am quickly now getting very, very excited for the Star Wars projects that are around the corner, especially now that we're starting to get fed some of these leaks and rumors. And this stuff with Vader and Kenobi really is having me excited in a way that I wasn't before. I was always looking forward to the Obi Wan Kenobi show, like most people. But seeing that there could be almost I don't want to say dual protagonist, right? Because he's not a protagonist, but seeing how we could be getting a lot of Vader and Obi Wan Kenobi has me really, really excited. All right, so I'm going to hold off on the Death Star talk until next week. Got a lot of information on the show this week, and trying to keep the shows down a little bit shorter than normal. So depending on what breaks between now and next week, the story that we have from Star Wars Inside Intel and story group member Emily Shokukani is kind of evergreen, as we say in the radio business, and not time sensitive, so we can cover it on next week's show, and hopefully some listener feedback as well. Drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed the show this week. Would love to get your thoughts on some of the leaks and reveals and commentary provided on a Star Wars podcast. And again, you can always do that by leaving those comments on YouTube or talkshownerd@gmail.com. Lastly, as I do, my EMBARK, a science fiction space opera series. 6 books now available. Fear the Dangerous Night, which is book 6 in the series, is now available in paperback and ebook. And as of right now, through the weekend, I have a special going on. All the ebooks are discounted in honor of the release of book 6, EMBARK, Fear the Dangerous Night. The reviews are coming in. Fans of the series are loving it. And I know you will too, so go and pick up your copy at Amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK, or head on over to mynerdworld.net and go to the blog at mynerdworld.net. For UK listeners to the podcast and US listeners to the podcast, in honor of the release of Book 6 in my EMBARK series, right now on the blogs at mynerdworld.net, there are codes for free EMBARK Book 1 and 2 audiobooks. There are a bunch of codes, and there are UK and US specific codes available. I put up as many as I possibly could for you to go and start off your listening of the EMBARK series with book 1 and 2. So those are available at mynerdworld.net on the blog page. Go get them while they're still available. If a code is taken, try another one until you're able to download it. And if for some reason they're gone and you really want a free copy of EMBARK Book 1 or 2 in ebook, drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. And if Audible has any free codes left, I would be more than happy to I would be more than happy to share them with you. All right, that's it. We'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.